Man, yeah, just wear the beanie. That's it.
That's pretty solid. I feel good about that. That's a good way to start this. Get the attitude up high, you know.
Good trade 2 J's if you could become Wolverine.
Where are you getting all this information?
I definitely heard some rumors about it. Are you still going? I get goosebumps thinking about it because it's like you can hear them get.
Car, I was going to qualify and I was going to drive that out the racetrack.
Just threw the hood over the ditch and
longest employee of knots.
You did some digging there, huh?
All right, literally 6 of you have asked, and they are now available. The official Jacob Gettins Teal Toque is available at shopfd.com, and you can still use podcast24 at checkout to save 20%. Cool thing is, also comes with a sticker. You get a bunch of different rarities. Look at 1 in 500 chance of getting the gold one. We got holographics, got a bunch of different ones. And since it became an ongoing joke, check this out. That is, I'd like to say a Where's, I feel like I'll get trademarked if I say his name, but there's a Where's Jacob. Awesome packaging, super, super cool. Take a look. You can find me in there. But head over to shopfd.com. There will be a link down in the podcast description. Use podcast24 at checkout. Save 20%. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Outerzone, the official podcast of Formula Drift. My name is Jacob Gettins, and today we have Robbie Bushido Blade Nishida. How's it going, dude? How are you?
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. I'm glad we got this sorted. Yeah, you and I've hung out more this year than we ever have, mostly because like we had no real reason until this year to hang out. But it's been cool. I mean, we've had a lot of really interesting talks, both in the vehicles back and forth and hotels and restaurants and stuff like that. So it's been, at least from my perspective, really interesting to get your very particular insight on drifting. So I appreciate all the time that you've given me this year in doing that.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I know obviously, FD, you're pretty good. I mean, a bigger addition that they have, they're doing things differently. And it seems like it's been evolving this past 21 years. And, meeting you and being able to talk and getting different perspective is always good, regardless how long you've been in the game. So greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I think we come from what I really like about FD in general is the fact that we're always talking about the sport. Like it's something I've spoken about before, but I can't stress enough that like every single time that we have the opportunity to talk about drifting, that's what we're talking about. Like we almost glaze over every other part of our life at FD events and just start talking about drifting.
Yeah, so just in general, when I was driving and when I stopped and I started doing, working with FD, doing the Judge Stewart thing and then judging and doing stuff in Japan, I see a lot of the FD guys come from the States to Japan, and we have long van rides going to trips, and also for us too, when we're traveling in between the rounds, in between the event, at the hotel, after hours, I think 90% of the time, we're still talking about the event. We're still talking about, what we're all doing. Like now I talk more about judging. You talk about, how you oversee everything and announce and all that stuff. But yeah, I think sometimes I think we're kind of, something's wrong with us because we do it so much. And sometimes I just want to stop and be like, hey, let's talk about, we do goof around and talk crap about other stuff too, joke around. But then, yeah, I mean, overall, our lives kind of evolve around this. So, I mean, what can we do,
Yeah, it's always interesting because we'll get into a lot of the weeds very quickly. The minutiae of drifting, judging, decisions, driver interactions, fan interactions, and some of it can be really heavy. And that's been maybe my biggest takeaway this year is that there can be a lot of emotional baggage in these roles where like it's heavy. You're being criticized by a lot of people online, and there's a lot of, directed opinions as to what we do and say. So I always think it's funny is we'll get to a part in a conversation where I think everybody is looking for a way to escape it, and you'll just immediately be like, "Can we just talk about dogs? Like, can we just like, how are your pets doing?" Yep. And you'll just like direct it away and give us some, reprieve.
Well, I kind of like it because everybody's kind of real. And, to be honest, there's a lot of people that, watch live stream and some people are just, messing around. Some people are really into it and serious. But it's just that we could only, like I said, perspectives is different, per person. So we could only explain what we can during the time we have. So times like this is really important for us as well. But also, I love it when people are actually real. Like at the moment, you're just kind of like, what the hell, but when drivers or teams or even you, Jared does it sometimes, Sage does it sometimes, and also us, between the judges, we actually talk about, what's real, how we felt about a run or how we felt about a situation. And I'd rather hear somebody tell me what they really feel than just kind of, like, oh yeah, you're doing a good job, and that's the better, because we're all not perfect. I'll tell you that straight up right now. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but we're all not perfect and we're always trying to better ourselves. So, other people's thoughts, and criticism is, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah, I think we always need to be checking ourselves and making sure that we're on the right path. And it's ignorant to think that we know everything or that, we've seen it all. I mean, I've been, I don't know if impressed is the right word, but every event where I think I've seen everything that could happen in a drift event, something weird happens, some crazy thing that falls into a gray area in the rules, or not even a gray area where it sits in between two rules and there's no precedent, it's never happened before. And there's a lot of pressure put on you guys to come up with some sort of fair judgment or protocol or something. And then, and then it falls back to Jared and myself and sometimes you guys to then have to relay that or explain that very quickly, and confidently with as much information as everybody else has.
Yeah, I think those situations happen at least 2-3 times a year. And like you said, it's been 21 years. And pre-FD, we're talking like drifting's been around for quite a long time. And from me, coming from pre-FD, just watching everything too, it's like there's, the cars change, the situation changed, the rules change, the cars change. I just said cars, but, and there's always something that's like, you never, that's why the rule book gets thicker and thicker. And that's because something else happens that we all never imagine. And we always joke about, we're like, watch, something's going to happen today and blah, 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 blah. And we're just joking, but it actually does. And I'm amazed that it's a never ending thing. And maybe that's why it's so fun, because if everything stayed the same and nothing changed, I think it's probably going to get pretty boring for everybody. So, rule changes are always good. New drivers are always good. New tracks are always good. There's so many things that FD changes up every year. And some people don't like it. Some people don't like change. But, as an older person, usually older guys don't like changes. But I think in order for the sport to evolve, I mean, look at where it came from 21 years ago and pre-FD, where, they had other competitions all over the world. And in Japan, it was never a sport. It became a sport. Now there's people, making a living off of this. And it's only been, 30 years or something? And all the other motorsports have been around longer than that. So who knows what's going to happen in 20 years? Yeah,
I do. I often have to remind myself of that we're, in the grand scheme of sport, especially motorsports, we're pretty young into this. So it's cool to be a part of it, even at the era it's at now. Although hearing, you and Brian and Jared and everybody else kind of reminisce about the old days, I do feel like I came in at like too late. But I'm also thinking like, we're making memories, we're doing cool shit now. So somebody who comes into the sport 10 years from now is going to feel the same way about my era. And I kind of have to remind myself of that. You guys we'll talk about FD Asia stuff or doing stuff in the Middle East and just, generally being ridiculous. And I'm like, damn, that would have been a sick time to be around. And then I'm like, yeah, but we're still doing interesting things. We're on the precipice of a lot of cool stuff. Maybe not as much partying and wildness like you guys got into back in the day, but I'm all right with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, we've been around for a long time. That's why things has shaped this way. And some people that hasn't been around for a long time, they probably don't understand why it became like this. Like, let's say, speaking of the way it's judged, and the way the judges see everything, it's like we all started from something and it turned into what it is now. So yes, I think for a new person to come in and see, they might be like, what the hell is this? They might not like it, but there's a reasoning behind it. And the rules behind it is because of what, like what you just mentioned, where we all came from that. But also guys like you or everybody else who are newer into the sport are also, a piece of the puzzle, because you guys could influence what it's always been, and what it's always been can't always be like that. It's got to keep going because there's more newer people and younger generation watching the sport. So, I mean, some of the older guys may feel like, oh man, you feel left out. It feels like the ship has sailed and they used to be on the ship. And I felt like that for quite a minute, or for a minute when I quit. Then maybe the next year was just like totally new. But as I saw it, I was like, man, you really have to stay on your game, especially if you're driving, and keep up with it in order to stay in the game and to stay relevant, So I think it's tougher now because you have the internet. There used to be no live stream. There used to be no drones. There used to be no smartphones back in the days. And just imagine how far it came, where before it took a while, you had to read a magazine to find out what the results were. Almost.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a little bit of internet, but not like right now where you just pop open your phone and all the stuff is there,
Yeah, and you're scrolling back and forth, and you're watching replays frame by frame from home, and you've got a week to analyze something and come up with a different call or whatever. Whereas you guys might have 2 minutes, 3 minutes at most to make an educated guess. So it's good and bad in that regard. It's great that we're at a point where we can have 2 separate drones in the air to get different angles, and we've got 5-6 cameras around track and a director and a production truck. And all that stuff's great because it makes for an incredible show and allows us to analyze things better. But with that, great power comes great responsibility. It also means that the entire audience has access to all of that as well, but they have infinitely more time. So, and that's the big difference between the two.
Yeah, that's part of the fun too now, because I thought, when, social media and things like that came out a long time ago, it was more positive. But I think it's just the way the world is going right now. Maybe there's more people that are unhappy or struggling, and maybe they use it in a, negative way instead of using it positively. But, things will probably change up, because I think, maybe because I'm just old, and I came from like, oh, you got to go look for your friends, and you couldn't call them, because when you're in high school, you're like, oh, is so-and-so at Burger King? Go to Burger King parking lot. He's not there. It's like, oh, let's go check his house. There was no, let me text you, and, or it's like, oh, meet at 5:00. If you're not there, everybody's gone. There is no, give me 5 minutes. I had to take a dump or whatever, it's just that it's a lot different how it is now. So I think the way we live and the lifestyle we have now, especially for drifting, we can't do the same things we were doing 20 years ago. So this is where we are, and you just have to accept it. I'm pretty good at trying to, sometimes I get pissed off and, read something or somebody says something to me and I get all mad and stuff. But, I get home and I pet my dogs and I calm down. I'm like, you know what? It's like, they're right too. It's not just, me being right or you being right, but everybody has a different perspective, and you're just going to have to accept everything.
It's a good way of putting it too, that they're right too. Yeah. I like the point of like having to find people. Like if you're listening to this and your birth year starts in the 2000s, imagine speaking to somebody and making plans a week from now that they will be at a certain place at a certain time, and just having to trust that they're going to be there at that place in that time. No follow-up, no text message, no Facebook, nothing. You just have to like, hey, I will meet you at this restaurant at 7:00 on Tuesday, and you have to hope that they're just there. It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember when I first started traveling to the States, this was like 2006 or something like that, 2006, 2007. I mean, there were no smartphones, so I couldn't even bring a phone. I had to borrow a phone at the airport, which was crazy expensive, and find a computer with a printer and like go and print things from MapQuest. A lot of probably people don't know what that is, but you got to type in the address and it'll show you how to get there on paper.
Yeah.
And I had like a booklet of just paper in there, because I'll be like, oh, I'm at, so-and-so's shop and I got to go to Apex, or I got to go here. And it's like, you just have to, you have to be really ready you can't just like pop in a dress and be like, oh yeah, let's just ask Siri or whatever, you know. It's just tougher times.
Tougher times, definitely tougher times. I want to get into how you got into drifting and how this all started, you know, kind of what you said almost 30 years ago.
So I grew up on a military base. My dad was in the military. My grandpa was in the military. So I'm lucky. I was born in Japan, but we were stationed. My dad was stationed here, so I grew up on a base. So I'm 3/4 Japanese, but I learned English in school, and I had American friends because we were from the base. So I really didn't have much Japanese friends. But you know, cars were really big back in the days. It was like early '90s, and everybody had a car. Like our parking lot was full of cars with cut springs and straight pipes. And we luckily had an automotive class. So, being a teenager, you automatically get into cars, this and that. Then you find out about toge, and we would go check out street drifting. But there was no drifting, was not really a thing. It was like you saw it every once in a while, but that was it. So everybody just drove fast on the toge. Mm-hmm. And one day I went to one and they were drifting. And I saw it, and just as a normal person who walks up to a drifting event and they see drifting, they're probably like, damn, that's pretty cool. It's like, I want to do that. And that's just how I got into it.
And then just from there into cars, start, driving up to the mountain late at night and just kind of blossomed at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a different, it's the difference between, it's not good and, it's not legal, and everybody used to a lot more back then in Japan where they would go street drifting, I guess you say. But it was just that nobody allowed the drifters to be on track. And that was pretty much it. So it was kind of like it's just like saying, oh, you want to go, same as skating or something. It's like you want to go skateboarding. Nobody allows you. They had no skate parks. So it's kind of like where you got to do it, like in front of your house or wherever you can find in a public place. So it's pretty, it's like some of the extreme sports. It pretty much started on the streets, and slowly, people started to accept the cars to be on the track drifting. And that's how we kind of started going that way. But there were no competition or anything. It was just everybody went and just drifted. Yeah. Then they had smaller competitions, and that's what kind of got into where we're at right now.
Yeah, I feel like the Japanese drifting culture, coming from the American side of things, is so idolized and ideologized. Like the idea of starting that way of going into the mountains, doing the toge, obviously, like kind of the scene that Initial D set. It's cool to hear that you were, I guess, as much a part of that, and then that truly was your upbringing is something that for a lot of us, watched anime or read anime or, whatever around that thing or heard stories. So it's kind of cool when what we deemed almost as a fantasy was a reality for you and your world. Although I'd heard from Charlie that you usually lost on the race home. So maybe it wasn't as much of a fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It's like we would race to wherever we're going to, either if it's going to be the mountains or whatever track we were going to, then we would race back home. And it was kind of like who gets home fastest was pretty much the winner of the weekend. And we tried everything in our power to get back home, but then I wasn't. It's either you got to break rules or go with the rules, and I was more of the guy who tried to stick with the rules, I guess. But
okay. Yeah, certain lines you just wouldn't cross, whereas others would, they're blowing stop signs and red lights and stuff, and you're like, I'll roll it, but maybe like, not blow through it.
Everybody's young, so it's like now I look back and I'll be like, man, it's like if I met myself, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or if I saw myself 30 years ago, I'll probably slap him in the face.
Like, what
or
are you
something,
doing?
Because it's just like everybody, it's like you grow up out of it, and that's the problem. Like evolution, it's like you grow up, and I guess I'm not trying to be or I guess growing up may be a different way of saying it, but it's like you learn, so you get wiser, so you find the next, you don't want to stay still, so you want to keep going. So I'm a lot calmer now, and I do things the right way now more than before, but that's just because, we learn from our mistakes, um, going to like guys like the younger generation are coming into the sport, you kind of want to set a good example for them.
Yeah.
Having fun is one thing, but being responsible is another. So hey, I'm starting to sound like a dad right now. Well, I am.
I mean,
but,
you are a dad, so that makes sense. So when did when did you feel like your drifting career started? Was there a pinnacle moment, an event, or anything like that where you're like, oh, I'm now a drifter. I've gone from being somebody who runs the mountains to somebody who is here to drive and to try and make drifting into a career?
Well, that was probably my first. No, maybe my second time I came to the U.S. In Formula Drift, because the first time I went, I had a borrowed car, and it was just one of those, hey, the car is there, you fly yourself out, just do whatever.
Right.
And, everything went pretty good. And I never went back. I just thought it was going to be a one-time thing. I never ever thought even, but I had certain deals where it was like, back then I was, using Falcons. And after my first round, I did really well, where people would approach me. They're like, hey, can you do this? You want to drive this or whatever?
Yeah.
But they were on different tires, and I kind of wanted to stay loyal. So I was like, no, it's like, they gave me my big break, so I want to stick with them.
You took it like, I think it was like Sam Hubenet or something in your first event. What car was that?
It was a orange. They call it the Silcamino. I think Jared called it the Silcamino. Yeah, it was like a cut.
S13.
I mean, think about the regs. That car would not pass tech. And it was probably like 350 horsepower or something,
Yeah.
But it was kind of good because I had no pressure, because it was like I just went to have fun. I, paid for my own plane ticket, just borrowed a car. I probably went through only like 4 tires that whole weekend. And it wasn't even the grippiest tires that they had, but it was just went, and then I didn't know anybody. The only people that I knew probably was I don't know, Kangushi, because I think he was on like a option video or something from before.
Right.
And everybody else was just a question mark to me. So I just went and just drove, and everybody's telling me when I had to go against Sam, it was like, oh, you're going against last year's champion. And I'm kind of like, I mean, okay, it's like, he beats me, it didn't really matter. But I'm lucky that I got to kind of see how it was on both sides, where it was like an extension of a hobby going to probably my later years. It became a career. And I think, where people call it professional, you make your living off of what you're doing. So you're a pro. But I don't call myself a pro until probably like 4 or 5 years of FD out of my 14 years, because the other time I had to work, come back. I didn't even have a car when I was in Japan, because I had no money. Everything I spent was, had to take time from work. I already had a child then, make ends meet. So every time I went to the States, I drove. But back then it was like, you don't get paid. You didn't really have so many sponsors. So the first couple years was pretty rough, but it was fun. And so I only had a couple years of my career that I could say I was a pro, where you actually made a living off of just drifting. But yeah, I think the second time I went to the States, where it was kind of like hey, this is your car, and my name card thingy on the door, or no, it was a bigger one back in the days. And then they were like, yeah, this is your car, so you're going to drive the whole season. It was kind of like, whoa, like that was pretty crazy, because coming from the Toge stuff and, just watching other events in Japan, and it was just really, really big. The scale in the US was just huge, where it's like, it really made you feel like, wow, like this is like something, this is serious.
Yeah, I could see that being, any international jump is going to be serious. Especially at that point in time in your life, right? Where it was I wouldn't say like the Japanese invasion, but there was a lot of there was a lot more back and forth about where the best drivers in the world were coming from at that point in time. Now I think the conversation shifted a little bit away from Japan and more towards Europe, which is a whole other conversation that maybe we'll get into. But at that point in time, the conversation was very much around like, can American drifters even compete with Japanese drifters? Like, do they even have any idea? And we had drivers from other disciplines and other things trying to adapt what they know into drifting. Whereas, any of the Japanese drivers, they're like, no, we invented this. This is ours. So the D1 invasion kind of thing was so different. So you taking out Sam Hubinet, like obviously that's a huge deal, but it was also, I guess, maybe more expected at that point. We're like, no, he's Japanese. Of course, he's going to give all the American drivers a run for their money. So it's just interesting to think of it like to see it in that kind of light.
But I think it was a bigger question mark because when I was driving, I know a lot of guys, but I didn't have the funding or I didn't even have the will to even go and compete so much in Japan. So everybody knew that I was a pretty good driver, but it wasn't like I was going to big competitions and winning anything. So a lot of people probably didn't even know who I was. And that was probably the thing where it's like just some Japanese dude from Japan arrives in some, weird car and he speaks perfect English, but he's from Japan. It's like, what the hell is going on? And everybody's probably like, oh, it's like, what, but yeah, it was, I think, so I'm really like a hybrid of both because when you're like a pure Japanese guy, like let's say you grow up in a Japanese community and went to Japanese school and, end up getting into cars and stuff like that. There's like certain steps that you have to follow because there's older guys above you, there's so much things in between there. But I kind of made like the shortcut because I was younger, but I was very American. So it was like, I was accepted in a different way, but also I wasn't accepted in a Japanese way. So I'm like a hybrid over here. It's weird to say because there's not a whole lot of people like, I guess me that, grow up here. Because, there's so many different, races and so many different types of people in the US where, in Japan, I think there's only like 3% of Japan is foreigners and everybody else is all Japanese. So it's like it's like saying there's 97 Jacobs and 3 me.
Right.
In the US. And you'd be like, well, what, Robbie, what are you doing? It's like, there's 97 of me saying this. Why aren't you doing it this way? And there's a lot of things like that here.
Yeah, it's just a completely different perspective. And yeah, I guess in that light, it would have been really weird for anybody in the US to be like you said, okay, who's this Japanese driver nobody's heard of who speaks perfect English? Like, what the hell's going on right now? So it's just funny to think about, Robbie, whatever that was, 2005. So, and that was Wall Speedway, right? Was your first event? Yeah.
I was a lot younger and less beard.
Yeah. Less beard. Were you rocking the visor back then too?
I had an open face helmet.
Right.
And like that. I had a motorcycle. And I sold it to buy the plane ticket. And that was my motorcycle helmet. So like I said, the rules and regs back then, it was like I had gloves that, I don't know, I probably borrowed it from one of my friends and I kept it. I was wearing Nike Cortezes because I didn't have any racing shoes. And the racing suit that I was wearing was some guy's, like my friend's friend. And I was like, oh, can I borrow it real quick? And that was kind of it. And it was okay. And, back then it was okay. But,
yeah,
it's more serious.
Obviously,
now. It's different.
I was going to say, obviously, it would not fly now by any means. So
no.
Yeah, I want to touch on your history of the open face helmet because that's been something you stuck with early on, even back in Japan. Breaking windshields and having to drive back home and just filling your face full of bugs on the drive back from probably Ibizu or something like that.
Yeah.
So. Why open face? Like, what's the debate there? What's the argument for open face?
Well, I guess it's really, or I guess it's frowned upon now, I guess, because the way it is. But I used to smoke, and it was the
Okay.
easiest. You just get out the car, you light up a cigarette, boom, jump back in the car and start driving. And it was just convenient because when we were like, let's say when we go to Ebisu or something back in the days where it was like filled with people, like I'm talking
Right.
like hundreds and hundreds of people at the track. It's it's hard to drive on the track because there's so many people on the track, and when they over, how can I say, when there's too many people on the track, they kind of don't let you in because
Mhm.
there's no space to drive. So I remember if we wanted to jump out the car, take a break and smoke a cigarette, it's like you take your helmet off, you light one up and smoke, sit there, talk a little bit, then you put out your cigarette, put your helmet back on, jump in the car, right? But this is the easiest. You just take your seatbelt off, jump out the car, just light one up, smoke, talk, drink a coffee, boom, get back in the car, go. So that was pretty much.
Ah,
I don't smoke anymore, so I don't need an
yeah,
open
yeah.
face helmet. Yeah.
What I guess so I've never been to Japan. You and I've talked a lot about trying to fix that problem, but what was Ebisu like back in the day? What was a Matsuri like back in the heyday?
So everybody
Yeah.
is, there's a lot of people coming in, and I think it's more of lacking of cars, and because the cars are more expensive, it's easier to travel. You can have your phone, and you could probably set your phone so you can just get on the bullet train, drive, or ride up all the way to Ebisu, and enjoy, because there's so much information online. But back in the days, there wasn't that, so I think there was less travelers, but there were still people out there. But I think more than that, there was a lot of locals. And I mean, like, let's say the Matsuri is a 2-day events. I think they said that the most they had was like 1,000 people or something. And I'm talking like 1,000 cars, not 1,000 people there. And on top of that, you have spectators. So it used to be the pits were filled at all the tracks, and it was just I don't know, it was just a shit show. It was hard to get into the track. It was hard to get out, but it was just cool because there's just so many different people from all over the place. And it's kind of becoming, I think now they're back down to like a few hundred, maybe. I think they said at the worst, it was probably like 300-400 cars at Matsuri, but now it's kicking back up because of, all the people that are traveling to, the Matsuris, and, kind of spreading the word. Even though the cars are expensive, there's still more people going there. So it's kind of starting to creep up. But, we were, sleep in our car, wake up, and they really, really did like 24-hour drifting, like 2 of the tracks at least. You can just get up. And I remember I was driving 5 o'clock in the morning at the East course, the Higashi course, and it was raining, and there was hardly nobody on the track. Then I flipped my car, or actually the car got on the side, and I had to wait there for like 30 minutes because it was 5 in the morning and nobody drove by. Now, me and my buddy that I gave a ride along were just standing by the car because we couldn't
Just
push
waiting.
the car. Yeah, we were just waiting for somebody to come and help. And the next car came, we're like, hey, So it was, it was pretty cool back then.
Yeah, I'm sure, sleeping in your car trackside is all fine and good until it pouring rains and all of your gear gets soaked and you get to spend the second day just getting it all dry cleaned, right?
Yeah, we did that too. We left it outside, or all our stuff, go to sleep in the car, sleep maybe like 2-3 hours, wake up, and it's like, oh shit, everything's wet. And it's like, man. So I remember I had to go to the laundromat, like right nearby Ebisu. Well, it's still a hike going down, but then we all went there. And I was like, I think I put everything. I was wearing my boxers and a t-shirt, just kind of waiting. And then I remember we had to walk to the convenience store next door in my boxers, and I kind of sagged my boxers so it looks like shorts, But yeah, just struggles when you're younger. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. It's always fun to hear about. I don't know. It's too often that we forget that people were once stupid teenagers and young and doing ridiculous stuff. Although you do not look your age by any means, sir. But you look at somebody and you forget that they were kids at one point. And
Yeah.
hearing stories about your wilder, younger years has been, both from you and from other people, has been some of the most fun that I've had. Because the Robbie I know is very different than the Robbie that, was around 15 years ago. Although I've seen signs of that Robbie a few times. So
Yeah, I mean, I still like to have fun sometimes, but you gotta. I mean, it's not about growing up. It's just you don't forget about it, but it's just you don't do it as often because you have different responsibilities, and that's how some people say life sucks. But I think it's great because you grow up and you learn more stuff, and every day is another day, and you get to learn more stuff. But it's just like drifting; it's like keeps progressing. And look at me now, it's like the dumb kid back in the days is like gets to sit here and talk to other people from all over the world. Doing a podcast right now. I'm in Japan. I'm actually from the future right now for you.
I know it's crazy.
Whatever hours
it's Friday,
away, but
10 a.m.
yeah. So that's crazy. Like you can still be irresponsible and dumb, not dumb, but just wild when you're younger and careless. But it's just that there's many things that you got to go through, and you could kind of, nobody's ever a failure forever. There's always a way to get out of things. So just hey, that's a good for the young viewers right now. It's like, if you're in trouble right now, just work at it. You'll be okay. What were we talking about?
A lot of life lessons. I don't know. This is supposed to be a drrifting podcast, but it's turned into self-help. But I mean, you come for the drifting, you stay for the life advice, right? So when did the, I guess, focus go towards FD and really putting a big pursuit behind that and trying to make it work and get those flights covered and not having to sell your motorcycle for a flight kind of thing?
Well, I think it's just everybody struggles at the beginning. And I know it could be, for like, let's say if you're making 6 digits or more a year and you have to spend 6 digits, that's a different story. But like, let's say if you're making only like 20, 30 grand a year, and you have to spend 20, 30 grand, the perspective is the same. It's just that the money you're spending is different. So I think back in the days, there was less support going to the teams. But at the same time, I think everybody was maybe a little bit more broke because, the series wasn't so big. So it was really harder to get to that level or the level they're at right now. So yeah, the cars didn't cost, 6 digits like how it is now. But at the same time, everybody was making less. So even though the cars were cheaper, it was still the same where you still had to travel, you still had to maintain the cars. So that's all the struggle that we had. But I think after doing it for a couple of years, and it was more of like, my wife and my friends were kind of like, oh yeah, you got something cool going on. It's like, maybe you should keep doing it. And it's always a friend and the family support. And my parents were not supportive at all of me, period, when I was younger. I left the house when I was like 17, turning 18, moved out. And this was kind of a way where everything started. I was almost like, hey, it's like if I can make something out of drifting. And back then they're like, oh, you're still running around with these stupid cars, you're wasting your time. It was like that. And I think by working at it, it was kind of like, it felt good too. Because when you accomplish something, like you go and you make new friends, or like, let's say if you have a new sponsor or you get paid a little bit for doing a gig or something, you're kind of like, you come back, you're like, hey, it's like, I'm actually doing something. And I think it's the great feeling of, the accomplishment and also getting something done that you feel like it matters. And it wasn't like I was trying to get back at him, be like, yeah, look at me now, but convincing people that doesn't, maybe that's my thing, convincing people that doesn't agree with me. And maybe that's why I'm judging right now, because I try to convince people and, tell them why I made this call. Some people agree, some people don't. But maybe I just like doing that maybe all my life. And since people gave me the chance, I think you have to take every chance you get. Some people pass it up because it's not, like, let's say if somebody says, hey, or everything happened like that for me. And I'm just speaking from myself. But every time I was kind of in a rut and I was stuck and I was like, oh man, what am I going to do next? There's always like that small chance, but it was this much work. But I think it's, to get here, you have to do this. Then this becomes something. But it's never this and this. It's always this. It's all the work is always like this to get to somewhere, and then this becomes something. This may not become something. That's just whatever. But taking a chance, like coming to the States, I mean, there's not a whole lot of drivers that did that. There was a few people from Europe and maybe a couple of guys from Japan as well. But I mean, the whole traveling thing is it's big, it's huge. Like, let's say James Dean does it now, and he's, soon to be maybe the champion. And that's really impressive to do, because it's like, it's hard to travel. It's hard to not test the car out. It's hard to not to be able to communicate with, your sponsors and your team, and everybody else who's in the loop, because you're on the other side of the world. That's really, really hard to do. So, it would be kind of cool to see more foreign drivers from the US, fly to Japan and do the same thing that I did. But I think the market here isn't ready for that yet, because, the US has more opportunities, I think, than Japan does. So I don't think that any of the US drivers would want to, skip the opportunity that they have in the States, come all the way to Japan just to prove a point. So, one of these days, maybe, if there's more opportunities over here, we'll see more drivers like that.
I mean, if the exchange rate keeps going the way it's going, I think there's a bit more of an opportunity, as kind of maybe cold and callous as that sounds, because it does come down to a money thing, right? Like, if you don't have partnerships or sponsorships that agree with you doing it or have a reason why they'd want you in Japan, it's basically out of pocket. So you need to have 80, 100 grand that you can blow to do that. And I mean, if that's at today's exchange rate, and that's if everything goes well, and that's in a decently competitive car. So I think it's because of the end rate, it's probably less than that. But it's just the same as all the other drivers. Like, that's how it happened with me. You had to get something started. It was a lot less. It wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was still money. I remember when Daigo, when he first started competing in the States too, he had to build a car, and he spent like easily 70, 80 grand on a car. And our first budget that we had with, when we went with Achilles, the first year was not a whole lot. So I had to, I think the budget that we had pretty much was just traveling costs. So the car and everything else, we had to come out of pocket. So I think that was probably the biggest, I guess, debt that I probably would have been in, is where you started. And it was like, you have to put a lot more than what you think you have into the program to get it started. And now, if you have it already, that's, more power to you. But for people like me, it was like, I would have sold my kidney back then, if I had to, but, you all start there, and, hoping that it's going to plateau somewhere or even out. I mean, if you break even, I mean, doing any kind of racing, I think you're doing really good, and making something out of it, especially, is very, very hard. But we all love it. So, what can we do? Yeah. What's the joke? It's like, if you want to make $1 million racing, start with 2 million.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
But,
something like that. Yeah.
So just because we're talking about like the whole international stuff, I've been judging in FD Japan for the past 6 years. And this year I was emceeing the English live stream. And I think I might be, the next round at Okayama is going to be my last round, probably emceeing for the US live stream. And it's not, it's just because I kind of want to start to do different things where, like you said, if I could help support the drivers that are coming from the US to Japan, and there are some people that are kind of interested, if I could get into that, I think that would be more interesting, because I think I could advise people more better, like guys like you. Now, you can do it remotely, the live stream, if you had to. So if you had to do that, guys like you who are already into the sport, who knows it, it's like you or Jared or somebody like that would probably be perfect for that. I'm, here, so I can go to the event and I can help the drivers get set up. And the main thing I want to do is, how, since I've traveled internationally, and then there's sometimes, you get, you burn bridges, and people, didn't, they do you wrong or something because money's involved and all that stuff. But I kind of want to do it so that if somebody comes from outside of Japan and they do it in Japan, I know how they feel. So I want to make sure that they get their money's worth and get it right. It's like let's say if this is their budget, okay, let's work with this budget. And this is what you need minimally. You can't have this, but let's just do this. And since I've, been around the industry for a while, I have ideas, and especially in Japan, I know the people. So I could kind of work things out with whatever the team wants. And if I could do that, that's probably a better suit for what I can do in the future. So that's kind of what I want to do. Obviously, if I could do the judging thing in the States again next year and, however long, I appreciate that. And I'd love to do that as well. But then as of now, I think that's what I want to do when I'm in Japan. I kind of thought about driving again, but it's not my thing anymore because I have this thing where it's when I retired, it wasn't like I retired because I couldn't drive anymore, but I retired when I was 40. And that's something that I had in mind for a long time. So when I was driving for Jerry's team, he was asking me to drive for the next year as well. But I already made my mind up and it was like, nope, this is my last year. Regardless what happens, I don't care if we have, unless somebody comes over and says like, here you go, here's $1 million or $2 million.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's a different story. But then it was one of those things where it was, I really like to see this sport evolve. And when I was in it, I was one of the younger ones. So I would like to see more younger drivers come in as well. And all the OG guys are going to have to start to, it's just like what JR is doing with his team, starting to bring in other drivers, giving them the platform to grow, and that's something that's going to help the sport grow too, because I think in Japan, that's what's happening. We got guys that are like 40 pushing 50. There's a lot of those guys. And don't get me wrong, they're badass drivers. They were really good. But for the sport, I think if it's just a normal track day event, I think it's okay. But then depending on the character and what kind of person they are, I'm not saying that older people can't do things, but it's the same as you saying, why would you, or some people are different. Like, let's say I like old music, I like listening to what my parents listened to when I was younger as well, but some people weren't like that. And I think the public is there's more people like that where they kind of want to stick with their same age group. And drifting being a young sport, I would love to see it always stay like that. But the OGs and the older guys could always support it. Like another ex-driver or somebody that's, my era could come back and maybe they could start judging too, or maybe they could, help out a team. They could spot. There's so many pieces of the puzzle for it to work out. You can make a great team doing things. And like, let's say if you know how to get sponsors or if you know how to approach people, you could always advise that and make that your team. And, you can have a driver there and help that driver out. So.
Yeah, it's giving back really is what it is. Like, the sport got you to a point where, this is what you do. You obviously have, a lot of different income streams and different things that you're up to. But at the end of the day, it's drifting that's made your living or continues to make your living. Very, very similar to, this circumstance that I'm in where not only my hobbies or my other jobs being, this and announcing, but like my day-to-day work is drifting. Everything I do all day is drifting. And it, when I get to a point where I'm able to retire or step away or I don't have to work as much or, let's say announcing becomes a full-time job one day and I have free time, it's like, well, I want to give back to the community and the sport that let me get to the point I'm at now where, I can relax a little bit more. So plus it's that knowledge and experience that you talked about. It's knowing, in your case, like what are the issues with a foreigner coming to drive in a different country? What are the issues they commonly run into, whether it's financial things or hotels or logistics or, even small things like how to get through the airport quicker, shit like that, right? Being able to pass that along to somebody else to make their experience in your country better means that they're more likely to do it more often or tell more people to come, which only grows the sport. Like the more we hold back information, the more we gatekeep or, withhold shit, the less likely we are to expand the sport. And this sport's not bad for it at all. We're pretty open as when it comes to a motorsport about how much stuff we talk about, whether it's car setup or logistics or sponsorship or whatever. But, we have to keep that mentality going. We have to continually feed this thing in order for it to grow, or it dies. You can look at other drifting organizations that have failed or are failing, and it's usually because people refuse to feed the next generation is really what it is.
Well, that, like you said, it's everybody that I know. Everybody that I know. Since I grew up on a military base, every 2-3 years, people would rotate. They would get stationed somewhere else. So a lot of my guys that I went to high school with, they're not even there. Everybody's somewhere else. So it's not like I grew up here in Japan and I know like, oh, hey, so-and-so, I went to high school with them. Hey, so-and-so, I went to high school with them. It's like all those people are all over the place. So for me, I was used to the rotation. But I didn't have that, I'm pretty sure you have friends that you still keep in touch with from high school or from back in the days. But I didn't have that either. So it was more of like I turned to my friends that I went to school with and did cars with. And the guys that I, did cars with, I still keep in touch with them. They're all over the States. And also the guys that I grew up with car stuff, and all my friends or most of my friends that still drift right now, they're pretty successful with, being in the drift scene. And I guess it's maybe some kind of, maybe there's other sports that you can do it with. But since we were at the growth of drifting, like we're like right now, it's like there is no way if I was a normal guy in Japan that had a normal job and I was not into drifting or cars, there is probably no way in hell that I would even know who you were and you wouldn't know who I was. And we wouldn't be talking on this podcast right now together. And it goes with everybody else all over the world. Like, this is a great community where it's like a lot of my best friends are in the community. I met so many people that affected my life through this car stuff. And I think drifting pretty much grew up. I think without drifting, I wouldn't even know what I'd be doing. So, like you said, we all kind of owe it to it. And since we're on that subject, whoever's listening to this podcast, I don't want people to they don't want, the old me is going to come out and be like, yeah, shut up. It's like, you sound corny as hell right now. But it's like, there's no way I would, and I think I said this when I was retiring at the banquet too. It's like, I owe it to the sport. So there's no way in hell that I would cheat the sport in any way. Like, I would rather walk away from something in a situation, especially I'm a judge. If I judge somebody that I know, let's say, right, I will judge them as the same as I judge driver B, because I will never give that person an advantage because I know them. That's not fair. And I don't like being fair or unfair with anybody. So, how I hear it all the time on, online and stuff. It's like, oh, it's rigged, or, he likes this better, or blah, blah. And I hear this from everybody, but everybody's looking at it from their corner, but we're in the middle looking at it from everywhere. So it's kind of like, there's no way in hell. Like, this past round at Utah and, Odie and, James Dean for their championship. And it was kind of like, it worked out the way it worked out. And we always get together at the end of the day. We're like, wow, it's like, it's almost like it's written, but it's not. It's like, if somebody wrote that, it's like, that's pretty damn good, because they have to include his car broke or he wrecked. There's no way in hell. There's like a gazillion ways of ending for one weekend. And there's no way in hell for us to be able to say, okay, yeah, I want him to win, or I want this guy to be here. It's like, that's just nonsense that people come up with, I guess. And it's funny when I hear it, because I'll be like, shh. It's like, I was watching, when I watched your podcast with like Lantain or, and Reese and stuff like that too. It was like, it's like, it's all of us feel the same way. It's kind of like, man, we're just doing what we think, what we see right there at the spot. And there's no, like you and Jared could be saying something we're not even listening to what you're saying, and then
No, I know.
there's no, it's like you can say, this guy did great, but in my head, if he didn't, then it's not. And that's just the way it is. But people don't see it that way. I wish I could just like cut my head open and show you what's going on inside, and prove to you I would, but can't. So
you mentioned something that like could easily be grazed over, but I want to make sure we circle back and focus on it. And that's the people come at it from an angle and we're in the center of it. I do think that's maybe something that a lot of people have a difficulty doing, which is removing any self-influence from a situation. Like people will, pick whatever driver and they'll say, oh, they're for this driver, they're against that driver. And a lot of that comes from whatever their preconceived notion of that driver is, right? Because if you're a James Dean fan, at no point do you go, oh, the judges really love James Dean. That's why, they're always voting for him. Like, I'm a James Dean fan. I love the judges because they're always voting for him. That doesn't happen. But the one time, if you're a James Dean fan, the judges don't go your way, it's immediately like, oh, the judges hate James Dean. They're always trying to find something. He's got to drive perfect. There's always something like that. Whereas we are surrounded by these drivers constantly. We're surrounded by their spotters and their staff. Like, you can't go an FD weekend without running into them. You couldn't, even if you tried, even if you wanted to isolate yourself completely, it'd be almost impossible not to interact with some FD staff member, crew or whatever, gas stations, hotels, we're often in the same areas. So you have to be agnostic in that because you're always just around FD people and it all just kind of blurs together, to be perfectly honest. Like, I don't have a favorite driver. I have drivers that I know better than other drivers. I know Jonathan Hurst. I know Simon Olsen very well because I used to do work with them. And that's, not something I've hidden or anything like that. I've made that pretty clear. I know them better than I know Joao Barillon. I don't know Joao Barillon very much. Him and I just haven't had an opportunity to hang out. But I will announce those runs the same way. The only difference is that I might be able to speak a little bit more about the history of Simon Olsen because I've had dinner with his family. And that's it. It's not that I like him more than another driver.
Yeah, it's like, it's the same thing. It's like you have more information. And I remember that's something that I didn't, like when I was driving, and social media and everything just started to get bigger towards the end of my career. And
those early day vlogs were great, by the way. I went back and watched like your early videos.
Oh,
bro. Yeah, it was good times.
So that's also your job. Like if you want, and I didn't notice that until I quit, or towards the end of it, it's like, it's not that, Jared was announcing, and it wasn't that Jared likes somebody more than the other. It was just that he had more information. So it was like, your guys' job is to fill the silence and talk about what's going on the track. And like, let's say if you knew driver A had a 2J in it and you didn't know what kind of motor the driver B had, you can only talk about driver A. And the driver B would be like, oh man, Jacobs, he's, favoring driver A because he's talking about him more. It's like, no. The driver B's responsibility is to go to you and say, hey, you're announcing, I want you to know this is what's happening. Or just send you a text, be like, hey, I'm so-and-so. Can you do a shout out to this? And I think you and Jared would be happy to, as long as you guys have the time to do it, but then you guys would be happy to do that. And, the whole joke about, Chris Forsberg gets the win.
Forsberg gets the win,
thing, right? That's exactly what it is. This is like, and I just talked to Jared about it this last round too. It's like, he's really good friends with Chris. But it's, not that he, obviously we're all pros here. So it's like, it may seem like it if you don't know the person as well. But then I myself, after I was a driver and there's some things that I thought like, okay, the judging, or maybe there is something going on. But now that I'm in it and I see it, and man, I wish I could just like literally show you that I'm not lying or making this up, or to everybody watching this. It's like, man, there's nothing it's just what you see. It's like as seen on TV, pretty much. There is no gimmicks or there is no planning. And I cannot express that anymore because that's what I was amazed about. I was like, oh shit, it was just the judges go. We don't even, here's our routine. I mean, too, with the judges, and maybe some people don't know. It's like all the judges pretty much travel together because we have one rental and we usually hitch a ride with each other. We usually eat together. We usually, if we walk the pits, we do. We walk together and we kind of just hang out and have our little own group. And pretty much that's it. We don't really have any attachments. We don't have any secret meetings with anybody. Maybe we'll talk to some drivers that has concerns. But there's nothing other than that. All we do is go there and we have a list of drivers and we just choose from there according to how they drive. And there is no, hey, this guy is sponsored by our title sponsor, so we need you to do this. It's like, really? It's like, I would quit if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I want you to do this because this is, how it is. I'd be like, you know what? I'll quit and I'll rat you out too. I'll be like, I'll tell everybody, I'll be like, yo, man, this guy tried to buy out somebody. And I would quit because it's, going back to what we were talking about, it's like we've been in the game so long that I have pride in what I do. And we try to do it right. We're pros, so that's it. It's like it's what you see.
I'm super pumped to meet as many people as I possibly can this year, especially those that are smart enough to use FD Podcast at checkout, save themselves a couple of dollars on their FD tickets. Those are the people I really want to meet, mostly because I get a ton of high fives, a bunch of thank yous. A couple people tried to give me some money for it, but nope, didn't take it. But yeah, if you want to be one of those lucky few people to save some money, use FD Podcast at checkout, save a couple bucks, see you at the event. In that same vein, I don't want people to be like, make an assumption that we don't try to further our knowledge or how we do our jobs. Like from my perspective, I do spend quite a lot of time trying to learn more about the drivers. I mean, you've seen me, like I will go out and walk the pits pretty often. I will try and spend 5 to 10 minutes with every driver. Some weekends, a driver might get more attention because they pull me aside. We get into a great conversation, and that means I only get 2 minutes with another driver. And without speaking too much on your behalf, you guys are constantly talking about other series. You're constantly talking about other events. You're talking about what drivers have brought up to you, either when you guys do walk the pits or when, we have the drivers meeting or whatever, or even just with Sage. I mean, I don't think, as much as he's, the founder and the president, I don't think he gets enough credit for his drifting knowledge because it's not talked about quite like all that often. Like he is incredibly intelligent when it comes to drifting, and it's from such a unique perspective too, because he has an ability to like almost predict situations in drifting before they happen. We're like, we'll talk about like, hey, what if we did this kind of rule, or like, what if we did like this kind of shift? And I do it constantly. I'm like, hey, guys, I have an idea. And sometimes they're okay. Sometimes they're dog shit. Every once in a while, they're pretty good. And like, he'll come back and he'll sit and he'll be like, have you thought about this? And he'll bring up some point and we'll all go, shit. Like, you're like, never mind, this idea doesn't work because this one situation makes it null and void.
Well, I think some of the drivers too, they bring up good points. And sometimes it happens, outside of the drivers meeting. Sometimes it does happen during the drivers meeting. But I think like what you're explaining about Sage is, because we travel so much, especially when he was coming to Japan, we'd be in the van for hours talking about just anything. But, he once told me that he's like, this is my life. Like, really, like you said, I think people don't give him enough credit for what's going on because it's like, it's constantly about, he wants to bring in new technology. He's open. And there's some things that we request and it doesn't happen, but it's not because he doesn't want to. It's just because, like, let's say technicalities or maybe funding or I don't know what it is, all that stuff. it's easy for us to sit there and say, oh, we want this, but the guys that are trying to make the solution has to, it's not just let's buy this. Okay, yeah, let's buy it. But it's not just like that. It's you have to go back. Oh, how much do we have for this? What can we do with this? Can we find a good pricing? The timing to buy it? Is it okay for everybody? Is everybody on the same page? There's so many layers of, I think when you work at a corporate company, because I have before, you understand that layers where it's like when you just, work at a normal, let's say you work at a car shop that doesn't have a structure. I'm not talking shit about, any small business or anything, but it's like when they're just kind of like, oh, I broke this, go buy this. Okay, hey, go buy it. Here's expense, done. But
Yeah.
I think when it becomes bigger, then it becomes, why did it break? Who broke it? How can we, not let that happen anymore? So there's so many different other layers that for us, sometimes we're just like, oh, can we just get this? Or can we move this cone to here? And it's more of the, well, if this happened and this happened, what are we going to do? I mean, we never had it before, but when it was last year's Utah, I was just talking about the cone. It just popped in my mind. But even that is like we had the lead car hit something and then the chase car hit the cone because of the lead car bringing it into the track. And then there was damage. And it's kind of like, man, there's so many, like that's something we never even thought about before. And that's something new. So Sage has to kind of like go over like 3-4 steps forward on your solution or my solution. And sometimes it works and sometimes it's just a nah, and I respect that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't see that,
Yeah, he just thinks in such a different way and is able to provide perspectives that I think we, or often people can get caught up in their own idea, thinking their own idea is incredible, which is good. That's how you get an idea to come through. And that's how you present it, is with passion and vigor. But Sage, not being a pessimist, just being an ultra realist, where he's like, okay, let's strip away your enthusiasm and your love for your idea and really get down to the core of like, why do we need to do this thing? And if we do it, what are the unintended consequences? Because all you're thinking about when you present an idea is what's good. And he's very good at looking at it and going like, okay, that's great. These are incredible things that this idea will do. But what could go wrong? Because it will, at some point it will go wrong. And then what do we do? And that's, it's such a good feature, because at no point has he been like condescending when doing it. It's now, I've never felt like an idea has been like shut down for no reason. It's just like, he's really good at breaking something like that down.
Oh yeah. Like, you just brought up something that just popped in my mind too. Like, let's say if you're a circle and, he's probably like right in the middle.
Yeah,
so he's looking
center.
out to everything, right? And we're probably we're on the layer right outside of that dead circle. So we're still looking in, but we have other perspectives. And then the teams and the fans are probably on the outer circle looking one way. It's just because, that's all you have to worry about. You just have to worry about your car getting there, your car being okay, performing well, doing social media stuff and pleasing your sponsors and finding sponsors and, all that stuff is the team. So they're only looking this way. So they don't see it from this way. But yeah, if you're in the center of the circle, you have to worry about this guy and this guy and this guy and try to please as much people. And yeah, you can't please everybody. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that are unhappy, but also on the same time, you have to do a good job there or this many people won't be happy. And I think that's why the sport is so big and still growing. Yeah.
What do you, this is not to like make you look like the bad guy, because I think you're probably one of the most liked judges. I don't know. It's always funny because with Reese is a really good example of this, right? Like he was the people's champ coming in. He was, Chelsea Denofa spotter. He was the guy that was going to speak for the OG, not the OGs, but like the grassroots guys and all this stuff. And I knew and he knew and we all kind of knew that eventually that sheen and that polish would get worn away, and eventually there'd be people like upset with him. And I went through the same thing where it was like, oh, I'm the new guy and it's great. And then at some point in time, it's like, oh, Jacob's doing this wrong or that wrong. But I feel like you've always done a really good job of sitting somewhere in the middle, and that polish hasn't rubbed off completely. But what do you think people are getting wrong? What do you think the misunderstandings are from, let's start with maybe the fan perspective. What's something that we could teach them or tell them that would provide a bit more insight as to some of the misconceptions that we keep seeing?
Well, I think if you're a true fan, or if you're just watching it, like let's say if they're watching, like let's say if this is like you just watch it every once in a while, FD.
Yeah.
You just watch it, and I just want people to enjoy the drifting and just keep the being a fan of this driver or that, just keep that out. Then now you got the second layer of fans where you're a fan of this driver, and this driver, you want them to do good. Now, that's two separate things where these guys are the ones that are more vocal, and they don't see it the way we see it if their driver doesn't win. So I want these guys to know that of course you're gonna like what you like. Like if you drink Coke versus Pepsi, you're always going to be a Coke fan no matter what happens, right? And I think it makes it easier because, and maybe like you said, the wearing off stuff, I don't know if that's the truth, but then because I was a driver before, so people actually know me a little bit more. And I think the problem is like, Brian Eggert doesn't do so much outside. He does a lot of stuff. He knows a lot of people in the industry, but it's not like he gets in front of the fans and does anything. And, same as Reese, he's a great, instructor and a good judge and a good spotter too. But then he has a little bit of that layer because he was, doing spotter for Chelsea, right? And Vernon's same. He's hidden in the dark. Good dude, awesome guy, a great judge. But it's just either we're not public enough or too public. So if you're a little public, I think when you see my face, let's just say if you see my channel on YouTube or you see me from an old something, and you kind of trust that person when you see them, because if you know them, you feel like, oh, this is just like saying, like, let's say if your mother told you something and a stranger came up and told you the two opposite things, you're probably going to go with what your mom said. So going back to the judge or the judging part of it, if your driver says, hey, I got screwed, what's going to happen? They did get screwed. Yeah. It doesn't even matter. Yeah. And some people do see it or don't see it. But I think if you're a super fan, I don't mind that. It's like you like the driver, and I wish the fans will support the drivers more because we don't need that support. We're the punching bag. We're okay with it. And, we signed off for it. It's okay. But in order to get that, like you have times like this and FD makes these, like Reese does the explanation and stuff like that. I want people to watch that, at least give it a chance and give us a chance of us trying to explain, because if we explained every run, the live stream would probably be 10 hours long. Yeah. On a weekend, and that's impossible. So they do it within 2 hours or 3 hours or so everybody gets to watch it once. We'll come back to it and try to answer more questions because the explanation is very, very important. And you guys have to do it within a minute or two, and then also we're sitting separately, so sometimes we show you like the whiteboard, and says, oh this happened, or that happened,
or the hand signal every once in a while. I'll get the thumbs up, like, you're like
or this, or whatever it is,
or 00, the old double the old 00.
But if we can do that better, which is very very hard, and the stuff that they're bringing in right now, like some of the telemetry stuff, I think that's a great addition too, where that will make some things black and white. And I know they're still working on it and is, gradually getting into it, but that will actually help the judging part of it too. But the crazy part, when they have, I think on the live stream, they do the who do you think won voting thingy, right? Your driver, like, let's say you like, you like driver A, you're a fan, and driver B. Driver A spins out. People still vote for driver A. There's still like 15% of people that wants to see driver A win. So when it comes down to people complaining about the judging or judging the judging, I know some of it is right because they're very technical, but some of it is just oh man, I'm just mad because you didn't pick my guy. And the technical part comes from, being at the driver's meeting, knowing the rules. Like I could probably tell you pretty much everything on the rule book on the judging side of it, and I bet you there's a lot of people that still don't know the whole thing. They probably never even read the rule book. And we always talk about that where I wish we could have quizzes at, the events towards the drivers and the maybe spotters and say, hey, it's like, do you guys really know? Sometimes we have to explain ourselves. And even to this day, sometimes we talk to drivers and they're like, oh, line is important. Like, dude, like line's been important for a long time, So things like that, it still amazes me how much people don't see the big picture because they're so, and I'm not saying that it's like ignorance or anything. It's because they're concentrating on their program so much that a lot of the other stuff on the outside, they don't have room for it. And I totally get it because you have a life, you got a normal life, you got to stay breathing and feed yourself, then you got a program to run, then you got to make sure that you please the fans and the sponsors, and you got to make sure your team is happy, you got to make sure the car is good. There's just, I think we all get to see a glimpse of the event 2 hours or 3 hours, and that's it for some people. But I think for other people, it's just a lifetime. Like for us too, travel, talking, communicating, all this other stuff too. It's like there's so much behind the scenes that I want people to look into that a little bit more before they make their final, like, oh, you guys suck,
Yeah. I like that. And this is like, contrary to popular belief, this is not me. Although there was a rumor within FD that this was me. You track staff, this was not me. There's a new account on Instagram called FD Rulebook. I don't know if you have seen it, where they're breaking down. It's not me.
Your new account, right?
Shut up. I had 3 separate people from like 3 different groups, one being a fan, one being one of the track guys, and then like one of the operations staff all asked me like, hey, I saw your new account. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, the FD rulebook. That's got to be you. And I'm like,
I think I was there when they the track staff mentioned it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you just really asked them.
I would just assume. No, but like that shows me a couple of things. One, talking about the different groups of people, the casual fan, the driver fan, and then we have this small group that I would call like the same people that listen to every one of these shows, the same people that watch all of Reese's videos, the people that watched, all of qualifying, like our 1% group of the hyper fans. And like there's certain hyper fans out there that like know more than I do in some scenarios. They know the stats better, they know the history better, and that's incredible to me. Those people, and I know you're listening, like thank you. You guys do a lot of work for us that's not asked of you, where you will correct people and get into arguments on message boards and defend what's going on because you actually understand what we're trying to convey or maybe don't have the time to convey, which is always massive and hugely appreciated, even though we maybe don't get to shout you guys out enough. But yeah, just seeing that kind of stuff of the rule breakdown, I think is really, really important. I will 100% agree. There are drivers, there are spotters, or staff members that don't understand the rule book in the same way. I've had very long conversations with teams about rule stuff. I think the line thing has maybe been one of the biggest things that people have had a hard time adjusting to. And it's a conversation I've had for probably 2 years now, it's very easy to look at proximity as the way to win in the chase. And it's not really, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not really what you guys are mainly focusing on right now in the chase or even in the lead. It's kind of line is the first thing, the chase, the proximity and the angle adds to those things. If you don't have the line down, it doesn't matter, as much about your proximity, and that includes in the chase. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest things for people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, and another thing even I kind of, well, I thought about it before too, but it's like something that we don't ever emphasize is when you run a line on the outside in the lead and you're running the absolute outside line, one day maybe I should make a video of it, but then if the chase car, and it's always, the chase car never runs the same exact line as the lead, and I totally get it because it's super hard, and to be able to keep proximity is very hard too. But the chase car usually runs a smaller, shallower line, and looking at whatever 100 feet the tracks are, if you run a shallower line in the chase, it's always we talk about speed all the time, but you have to think about the distance the drivers drive. So when you're in the lead position, and you're on the absolute outside line, and like, let's say if you drive all the way out, trace the track, and you're like a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet away from the outside line, and you draw the same map, and if you calculated how long the length is, usually the chase car is driving exactly right there.
Yeah.
A shorter distance. So
2 circles. Yeah.
Yeah, the distance is very important because then that comes from, the lead car is slower or, the chase car is faster. I think a lot of these cars are almost the same now. Everybody's running 800 to 1200 horsepower. All the tires are pretty much, 200 tread wear. Maybe there's, differences in sidewall and sizes and maybe different characteristics. Maybe one's better in the rain, one's better in the dry. I have no idea. But all the cars are pretty much about the same weight and everything's becoming more closer. So I don't see the big difference in, this car is so much more faster. Back in the day for me, it was like, you're on this tire, you have this much horsepower. You're going to blow the doors off of the chase car. But now everything is getting super close. And now it's all about the distance they're driving. And that goes back to the line where when you're in the lead, if the lead car drives an outside line, the chase car has the opportunity to get close, but not too close where they're, surpassing their front tires. So it gives more leeway to the chase car to be able to catch up, to make, smaller minor mistakes if the lead car is doing a good job. And that's something that it's kind of been, it's been the trend for a while. But I think now it's more and more, it's easy to see because the cars are so close. The driver's abilities are all pretty much the same. Everything is so much closer to the point where it's like now we have to be super picky on what the lead car is doing. And to be honest, if you have those, like the dog races, they have that bunny that's leading and then the dogs chase it. If we had like a ghost lead car and just threw cars at the ghost lead car because they do a perfect lead and see how well the chase cars could chase, we could probably pick a winner just doing that. Because, the lead car making a mistake, not doing well, that's, it'll also be added to the equation on who's going to, win or lose. But like, let's say if the lead car was always perfect, then we all know who the best chase car is. And if we do that, we can actually pick who the best tandem driver is. Now, since we don't have qualifying now, the lead car matters. It's like we want to see the lead car doing a good job, running the right outside line, doing whatever they have to do. So it's a real good balance. But like I said, driving the distance is something that everybody kind of forgets about. But when you see a chase car that's running a shallower line, they're cheating the distance. So
yeah, I wonder if that's what we get some of the arguments about people like, this driver's like super slow in the lead, but they're really fast in the chase. And there's a few drivers we can point out that gets that kind of reputation. Is it more that no, that driver maybe out front runs a really wide line with a lot of angle, so therefore they're going to be slower, and then in the chase they're cheating some of the line. They can keep up. That's what it comes down to.
I think we got into that this year because we were looking at data because we can pull data from all the cars, and we asked Kevin, the tech, to give us the data, and it's just the results are just amazing because most of the cars are about the same speed wise.
Yeah.
So the only thing then I thought about it more. I was like, oh, maybe it is a distance. And I think it's more of, this goes to some of the FD drivers and the prospect drivers too, but it's just some of the cars are just so gripped up to the point where it's almost uncontrollable, where some cars are a little bit looser so they can run a better line easier. I remember, he's not driving now, but like Justin Pollock was one of those guys who he was like just all style, a lot of throttle, hanging it out, and he ran a really wide line, always a lot of angle. But I think it's just because he probably didn't grip up his car as much, and he drives like, or like him. Chelsea's kind of like that too, but I know Chelsea's car was a little bit more maybe hooked up, but he threw it around like it was like that. But even he says, some of these cars are probably just too, they're built too much to the point where it's undrivable, and the drivers are just struggling to keep it driving. I think if they loosen it up a little bit more, and that's always been the thing where it's like, if your car's loose, it takes away you can't trust it as much when you throw the car because you think that it might, over rotate or whatever. But I think if you start from the bottom where you're driving something that's loose, you already know how much you have to throw it, or you could throw it. So you just have to, go backwards and try to figure it out. But if we can do that, I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's just my thing. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I think some of these cars are just too hooked up.
I agree. I agree. One of the most frustrating parts of this season, and I try not to, I try not to provide specific examples of like drivers or situations whenever I can, but I think this one warrants it. And that is the kind of the Manoa debate. For probably 10 years, it's been that argument. Oh, these cars are too fast. They're too hooked up. We're putting too much toe into them. We're doing all these crazy things with progressive toe and, suspension dampening to make these cars really twitchy and really fast. And it's ruining the sport. And then we had a driver come in who didn't do that. And I'm sure there's alignment things that I'm overlooking, and they're doing that kind of stuff. But Manoa didn't do that. The car is not crazy hooked up. It is still quick. It is not twitchy. It's very smooth. And he is slower. He is, let's pick a time, a quarter second slower around a lap, whatever, a full second. Who cares? But he did the thing, or Jerry did the thing that everybody's been asking for. Take some grip out of the car, make it less aggressive, make it more stylish, slow the car down a little bit, and make it easier to drive. They did that. He's done incredibly well by all standards. And people are still mad that, he's driving slow. I'm like, what do you want? What do you actually want? Because someone gave you the thing that you have been asking for. Someone truly did the thing that you've requested, and you're still fucking angry. And that's when I was like, there's no winning. There's no making you happy. And it's not everybody. It's just a select group of people. It's that one circle we talked about. But it's he did the thing.
I think that comes from, or, you have to think about it because they just came in from the outside. So they watched FD for many, many years. Manoa's father tried to even enter, so out of pocket. He spent a lot of money, and it was COVID, ended up not being able to drive. So if you think about it, they're not just let me just try it out. They're serious. They're putting every dime that they have into this program. And they're not going to just say, oh, yeah, let's just grip up our car and, blow the doors off the other guy. They came with the strategy where it's like, they know that the lead is very important. And, coming from a sim or whatever he does, he's very good at running the outside line. So his father his father, I call him like the Japanese Odie, because, Odie's like the suspension guru as well, and Chelsea too. But he sets the car up so that it's very easy for his son to drive, because he doesn't want the car to be hard to handle. We understand he's a great driver, but he's still, a teenager. So he's not as experienced as a, driver. So he's giving him the car that's perfectly matched to what the judges want to see. And this is not like something that we've came up with this year. It's something that we've talked about all the time. And I remember from before my days, it was like, you know, being steady in the chase. And yeah, like Minoa does chase. He does cheat the line and angle a little bit, but he'll do it to the point where it's not so bad that it's like, oh, look, you're doing something wrong. He does it
Yeah.
just enough so he could stick with the lead car. And that's probably what people think, like, oh, why can he stick with the lead car if the lead car's all over him when they're in the chase? Because he's running outside line when he's, you know, he doesn't run the same exact line when he's in the chase as when he's in the lead. That's two different lines. But he does it to the point where it's good enough to be able to beat the other guy, because the other guy can't do that. So
he read the rule book, he understood the assignment, and drives to what is going on. He is very attentive at drivers' meetings. They don't ask a lot of questions. I know sometimes they'll ask you specific things and just language barrier things. But you can tell the drivers that pay attention in the drivers' meeting. You can. And they're often the drivers that do well. They sometimes have questions. They don't ever argue. They're never like, no, we need to do this, we need to do that. Those are the drivers that go, this is what you want, this is what I'm going to do. And those are the drivers who end up doing well.
yeah, some of the questions I get from them is the language barrier thing, but at the same time, it's language barrier thing. It's because, you know, how sometimes like sarcasm isn't so big in Japan, and
yeah, I know.
And sometimes they'll be like, I thought it was like this. And it's like, no, it is. It's like the way it was said at the driver's meeting, sometimes they get confused because it's just kind of like, what? I thought this was what we were looking for. And then all of a sudden, you know, so
yeah.
Other than things like that,
funny.
like you said, you know, they're flexible about everything because they're new. Maybe, and that's easier because they're like you said, they study everything and they watch everything, and they're just kind of like, oh, you know what, this is probably the best way to do it. So like honestly, a lot of the teams and drivers are overthinking, you know, some things. Sometimes they're a little bit too much, and I think the guys that really understand the rules and understand what the judges are looking for. And, you know, I know some people will be like, well, we don't know what the judges want because they're all over the place. Besides that, usually it's pretty straight up. You know, it's like, hey, if you're in the lead, drive like you're going to get a 100-point qualify run. If you're in the chase, match what the lead car is doing as best as possible. And it's very, very simple. And yeah, there's like, you know, when they switch, you know, things happen. It's a little different, but we still evaluate both runs by lead and chase and how well they chase the lead car. And it gets close. And sometimes, you know, you look at it in different ways. And, you know, even during the, you know, or among us judges, we have split decisions. But usually the split decision is like let's say if both drivers did two mistakes and one judge thinks this is a little bit more heavy, the other judge thinks this is a little bit more heavy. And some judge thinks, you know what, it's too close. And that's pretty much it. And
that's
it's not
a really good way of putting it. I think that's super important, the way you just put that.
Well, because after we have split, you know, obviously we talk about it afterwards and be like, oh, why did you do this? And then they'll explain it because we want more information. I want to know how the other judges are thinking as well after the fact, not during when I'm thinking. And when they give me the suggestion, I'm like, oh, okay. Sometimes I agree. Sometimes I don't agree. But like, you know, if you liked something that the lead car did, but then he messed up at outside zone 3, and I saw something that happened at outside zone 1, but you didn't think it was a big deal. That is why there's 3 of us, because if it was just you, then it would be driver A or driver B. But if it was 2 guys looking at it or 3 guys looking at it, and one guy thinks this is a little bit more serious and the other guy thinks this is a little bit more serious, that kind of makes it, you know, okay, that would be a tie. But you got the third judge, and if the third judge says it's a one more time, it's that damn close. So when I see driver A, driver B in a one more time, I actually think that that's like the closest you can get to a one more time, a true one more time, because it was that
Yeah.
close.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's the ultimate sign of like you guys are this tight. Like, and those are my favorite too, because it's like just dramatic and fun and exciting, and I get to try and pick your brains a little bit and understand why. And yeah, those are often my favorite calls. It's such a hard thing now because it is getting so close. We're having to split hairs so often. We're having to get so picky with everything. I know on my side of things, I try to balance being positive and then also critiquing at the same time. Like I don't want the drivers to feel like I'm shitting on them when I'm announcing it, but also my job more on the technical side of things is to more or less pick apart the run. And from my side, I've had several conversations with drivers like, hey, how can I do this better? How can I change this up? I've reverted recently to what I like to call the shit sandwich, which is like open with something that I really liked about the run, break it down, and then, end with something that I really liked about the run. So that way it doesn't more or less just seem like I'm critiquing the best drivers in the world on their driving abilities. But at the same time, I also am trying to inform the fans of what we're looking for, right? I'm trying to tell the fans, this is a mistake. This is a problem. This is what has gone well. This is something that hasn't. And, it's finding that balance of entertainment, education, and making sure I'm not disrespecting the drivers all at the same time.
Well, I mean, it's, we always joke about it, and sometimes, maybe one day it'll be a thing, but we always joke about, how, the judges would, take the heat all the time. But, I don't even want to go back and forth. Sometimes I'll be like, man, you know what? I just want to post something on social media, but I just think about it. I'm like, you know what? It's okay, because
it's not worth it.
That's what we're put here for, and then it's sad, but it's true, and it's never going to change. And I get it, it's like we get crapped on all the time. It is what it is, it's like, it's like voting, like half of the US wants this person to be the president. Half of the US wants this person to be a president. It's like the decision, it's never going to be one way. It's never, ever going to be one way. So every once in a while, when you see, a guy go against what you're watching, you know what? It's something, maybe it's something you missed. And I think, from the driver's meeting or whatever it is, or maybe it's the way you saw it, your perspective, maybe something in your mind, especially for the guys that are watching from home. It's like, we're not sitting in an AC room sometimes with, sitting on your couch drinking your beer or whatever. We're, this is seriously like, I don't get as tired as the FD weekends on my normal weekends, like not physically, but mentally, because we're sitting exhausting there. Every time a car goes, we try to take a break and, not think about it. But as soon as a car goes, we're so serious watching it. And then like, every weekend, it's like, I'm so exhausted when I get home because we're that serious, because we don't want to miss a thing, and we can't miss a thing, because that messes with the team and how the series goes. And it's a very, very serious, it's not just let me just go and I'll sit here and, act like I'm the shit because I'm judging and blah, blah, blah. It's not even like that. It's like, we want to go there and we want to make sure it's right for everybody. And that's all we could do. We know, or you guys might know, and the other judges might know, but then there's no way to prove it. So I don't even want to address that, like, going back on social media or whatever. It's like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's like, you can't convince the whole world to believe in something, and then that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. I've now stopped kind of checking socials and going to those places until I'm at least home. Like, because I'm exhausted. I'm very passionate about the sport. I have my own, obviously, opinions and thoughts and more information than the average fan has just because of what I have access to and the discussions I get to have. So I have to step away from socials now for a few days until the event's kind of settled. It sucks because I have to.
It's also, maybe I'm just trying to keep it positive and think positive about it, but that's kind of cool that you care. For the fans, it's like, if you care that much, that's great, because just think if nobody talks about, like, something happened and nobody talks about it, then it's not sad, but it's like, oh, like, nobody really gave a damn about that. And, like, let's say if every event we had no complaints and nobody talked about it afterwards, it's kind of like, maybe it's not exciting. Maybe, I don't know, you get worried about, maybe people don't care about it anymore. But then, people interacting, and like you said, there's some people that are defending us, or there's people, pros and the cons and whatever it is, in the comments and stuff. I think it's a good thing that even if the comments are bad, I mean, I think if it's directed where it's like just hate, like, what was it?
Different story.
I think Vernon, I don't get it too much either, like on my DMs or whatever, but like sometimes we get like a personal attack, like every once in a while. It's kind of like F you, this, and it's kind of like
recent one
Vernon showed us, he was like, yeah, check this out, I got my first hate something, it's like, we saw it, it's like, oh, it's like, we had to congratulate him, somebody popped his cherry.
It's like a little moment.
The US, but like you said, it's like it's very different. I think the Japanese side of it, they're not as vocal as the US, like the live stream in Japanese. I mean, the Japanese guys, there's always those guys that, talk smack about whatever, but afterwards and stuff, they don't really go and share it too much on social media, maybe because they're not as big as, people from the States on social media. But then it seems like they just kind of take it and that's it. And I'm not sure how it is in Europe. Vernon said, it's both, it goes both ways. But in the US, I know everybody's vocal and everybody has, it's a free country, so everybody has what they want to say. And I think it's okay, they could say it. But I think it's just, I just want everybody to know, even if, they like or dislike the judges or whatever, I just want people to understand that it's not like we're doing intentionally to screw anybody over. It's just the outcomes are the way it is. And that's just the way it is,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with the sentiment of I'm happy that people are passionate about the sport. I am very and truly happy about that. Sometimes that passion is directed in ways that I don't agree with. But ultimately, I'm happy that people have opinions about it and want to discuss it. It's just how you go about it. It's just, be respectful. Don't do any personal shit. Don't go after people if you're upset about a call or something like that. But if you have a legitimate thought or an argument or a way of improving it, I'm 100% all ears. I'm happy to have those discussions. And some of my favorite times are having those discussions with the fans at events or even outside of events, like just going different places, being in the drifting community pretty much daily. Even at my day job, like we have conversations about FD and, ways we could improve it or ways that it could change or what it could be in the future and stuff like that. And I don't know if I'll ever get sick of those conversations. So I'm very happy to discuss it, but in a respectful way.
We've been doing it for a long time and we're still doing it. I mean, think about it. Your job is, you probably do multiple different things, but we're not even at the event now and we're still talking about FD right now.
Yeah, we got a month to go before the next one. And it's all we can talk about. Not that it's, an FD podcast or anything like that, but I regardless, even in our downtime, you and I will find different things. You're the one who's convinced me that inner clips are the devil and that they shouldn't exist on drifting tracks.
It's not the devil, I think.
I know.
I don't know. I mean, if there's nothing else that you can go more in, like that kind of takes away the chance for the chase car to try to catch up.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, let's say if you're on the same exact grip, same exact power, same exact weight, and same exact drivability, the only places that you can actually try to get closer proximity wise is usually the outside zones. Now, I've seen like in Drift Masters and stuff like that, the inside clip is not against something. So the front of the car goes over it, and then the chase car could go more in and not hitting anything. Things like that might be something that, depending on how the track layout is, because the way the tracks are right now in the US is, it's a little bit different from how it is in Japan and the US. But I mean, that's something that we can actually look into as well in the future. And that has, came up in our discussions before too. So I just think that getting back on throttle, everything, if you're basically, when there's something in front of you that you can't go surpass that, getting back on throttle, running the same line is going to be really harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think that kind of helps it, helps the separation of the cars. And also, there's always contact in those areas too.
Inside clips, yeah. Because it's always, it's almost always a decel too, right? Like,
yeah, decel or coming from a outside clip, they try to play catch up because they don't want to get left, or from an inside clip to an outside zone, such as Jersey, the last turn, right at the last turn, people hit because at the inside clip there's a separation, and the chase car kind of feels like they have to, try to play catch up, and then they kind of come in too hard or something, and then the lead car kind of slows down, and that's where all the problem always happens. It's always and I think when the driver is driving, this is how I felt too. When I'm driving, you don't think of it like that. You're just like, I was doing what I was supposed to do, and the car in front of you just parked it. And a lot of people say playing games and parking it. I'm pretty sure it does happen, but I don't think it happens as much as everybody says so. I think they kind of forget about, hey, you were trying to play catch up. That's why the chase car or the lead car seemed like they slowed down, because it's like saying you went 50 miles the whole time, but you went 50 to 40 to 80 and slowed back down, and you caught up with them. And it's kind of like, of course you caught up with them. And now going back to telemetry stuff, we have data, and that we're able to study that this year too. It's like we're able to see how fast the chase car, like in Atlanta, how fast the chase car caught up to the lead car at turn one. And it's like 10 miles faster than when they usually are. So that kind of shows that, the chase car just kind of got a little too aggressive, and if we can get that information faster, it'll help out, us making the decision. But usually, the tech will come back, like Kevin will come back with data, and they'll tell us like, oh yeah, you guys were actually on spot about this, because this guy did try to, this guy slowed down too much, and this guy, try to play catch up too much or something, so.
I still would love to see, we talked about, I don't know if I talked about it on the show, but the idea of the inside zone as opposed to the outside zone, like taking a traditional outside zone, the same corner, but instead of us laying the zone per se at the rear end of the car, we lay that zone, whatever you want to put it, 100 inches ahead, right? Or 105 inches ahead, and then make it so their front wheels have to go through it. I think it would solve, I think it would solve a lot of problems. I think it would solve some of the issues with drivers going off track. I think it would solve some of the issues with paint getting destroyed and getting covered in rubber. So it'd actually be easier to see. It would reduce drivers that have large overhangs from having an advantage. It would actually, like I don't know where we would try it, but it's something I would love. Like even watching other drifting series that use more inside clips or inside, boxes, if you will, those things, they almost never get destroyed. Those boxes almost never get destroyed. You can see them the whole time. And it was that kind of spurred it. And I'm like, well, if we just moved it ahead and put it on the front wheels, what's the difference?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
maybe there's something I'm not thinking of, but.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. And, I think I kind of see it, it could happen in the future. But I think the other side of it, going back to, what Sage would probably say, is it's either about, like, let's say the track might not allow it. Like, let's say there's certain tracks that lets us do paint or lets us do flour or chalk or whatever it is. There's like so many layers to that. So really depending on that, it is a possibility, but it is something that we always bring up. And like, even after this podcast, we probably still talk about it. We'll probably talk about it in our window.
Yeah.
But it's something that we're going to bring up. And, one of these days it might happen too. And that'll be the new thing. And it kind of sucks. It's not like we're using everybody as guinea pigs, but it's not like, we're just like one day you wake up, you're like, oh man, we should do this. Yeah, let's just do it. It's not even like that.
Yeah.
There's the layers that we go through thinking about all this stuff. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And that's just the way it is. But sometimes it does. And when it does, it sticks. And that's where we're at right now with the rule book and all that other stuff. It's all the things that stuck from the past 20 years is where we're at right now. And it's going to keep changing. 10 years from now, it's going to be, shoot, who knows what's going to happen? We might have spec cars. We might have, it might be
Hover
like
cars.
other big racing series. Yeah, we might have, different kinds of cars. Maybe we might have, jump ramps in the middle of the track. Who knows? There's different things that can happen. So it's all a possibility, though. Yeah.
Make it like stadium super trucks, but stadium super drift, where there's jumps and there's corners and everything else. I think that'd be crazy.
Teams won't like it, though. The teams won't like it.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, sir, as much as I would love this to kind of keep going, I think the only question I have to kind of wrap it up is I went through your drift stats. Have you gone through your own drift stats yet? Have you done that? So if you go to driftstats.com, you can actually see FD Japan, FD Asia, basically all the stats. You have some really, really interesting fun facts in there. Highest qualifying, first, Las Vegas, 2009. So congrats on that. 128 total matches, which is wild to me. I'm sure that's probably shocking to you as well. Obviously, best event, third at Palm Beach in 2013. You also got a third at Evergreen in 2008. But the most interesting stat, at least to me, is that you and Ken Gushi are tied 3 wins to 3 wins. And at some point in time, I need a tiebreaker between you and Ken Gushi.
That's going to be hard. Because
I know.
It can't be drifting, though. He probably kicked my ass, so yeah. No, I mean, maybe one day I'll do a thing. Maybe we'll have like some beater cars or maybe even, I don't know, on the sim or something, yeah.
I would love a like retiree spec class of some kind. I went and watched like seniors hockey this past weekend while waiting for my son to start playing. And it was it was slower, but it was very methodical and it was still a lot of fun to watch. And it kind of reinvigorated that idea.
We always bring it up and I think it just comes down to like having budget for it or not. But I think if it's something that's easy, we were joking about me driving at the Super Drift at this year. And they were like, that would be kind of cool because it's actually not, a part of the series, but it's, has something to do with the series. But like things like that, you never know what's going to happen in the future. Like maybe a couple of the other guys that retired or didn't come back to FD anymore, maybe they might want to come back and do something. And that'll be like an exhibition thing because, right now the cars are just way too like built and the responsibility that you have. Just imagine having, a 6-digit car driving at Long Beach and one little mistake this old dude makes, like he totaled the car. It's like, what would you do? So there's like so much risk to that too, So maybe everything should be in clips.
Maybe.
I'm thinking, I don't know.
Yeah, a couple 600 horsepower LS 370Zs. Perfect. Let's just run those.
I'm down to drive anything, anywhere. It's just a matter of the opportunity and finding the time. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Well, sir, is there anything? Oh, go ahead.
No. And I think like all the judges, everybody drifts too.
Yeah.
Like everybody knows how to drive. Everybody came from driving too. So I think a lot of the guys kind of underestimate us where it's like, oh, you guys just sitting in a chair. Like, but it's like, I think we all kind of have a good knowledge of, the car. And yeah, it's like, we're not in 1,000 horsepower car now and crazy angle kits and all this other stuff, but there's still some sort. It's like, I think we are probably a little bit better drivers than just a normal, I think I know what I'm talking about type of person.
Yeah.
So I want people to see that, it's like, yeah, we're okay.
I mean, Reese did pretty well in Pro-Am this year. I mean, he cleaned up with a couple of trophies. Maybe it's time for you to dust it off and do FD Japan 3 or something like that. I think that'd be cool.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm glad
thank you very much.
you from the future was able to get some time. Anything you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to plug or say before we close the show?
No, I mean, just thanks for watching, and hopefully we can make the right calls in the future as well. But then, keep the evolution going, and don't give up on the sport. If you have a car, please go out to the track, try it out. If you get a chance to get on a ride along, it's just exciting. It's a life-changing thing where I can tell you personally, because it changed my life so much, and for you too. So it's a very exciting sport, and thank you for the support. And if you have come say hi to us. We're good people. Yeah,
we're good people. Can confirm. Check out all Robbie's socials to be down in the show notes. Check out the YouTube channel. It's actually a really good way to learn Japanese because you get both the English and the Japanese side of things. So if you are actively trying to learn Japanese, it's actually a really, really cool resource. Whether or not you intended it to be that way, it can definitely be used that way. It's a cool insight too. So I've enjoyed watching those after events to get your perspective on how the event went as opposed to mine. So that's been sweet. But we'll leave all those links down below. And thank you again, Robbie. Thanks everybody for listening and watching. If you guys dropped some recommendations for the backdrop here, obviously the new studio is a little more naked than the old studio. Thank you. I'm hoping. I think I might go with the corkboard idea of like making like the where you've got like all the different photos, you got all the strings attaching it and all that stuff. Someone dropped one of those comments, and I was like, that would actually be really fun to do and be kind of funny, like have the different sponsors
drivers and whatnot,
drivers, and like conspiracy theories in the background. It might be kind of fun. Can change it up all the time. It'd be cool. So. Well, thank you again, Robbie. Thanks for everybody for listening and or watching, and we will catch everyone
and
next
if
week.
you're going to leave a comment, be nice.
Yes, just respectfully. That's all.
Yeah, be nice, please. No, thank you.